Hi everybody! So today is December the 12th. Look at this, December 12th. You know what, right here? December 12th. And you want to show them the picture? Let's turn around. What picture is on December 12th? It's a fire! It's a fire. We're going to put our star on today. I wonder what we're going to be talking about. Well, let's go ahead and review what we've already learned, okay? Talk about how this is God's story to the world, right? And how the world's going to start right here in the very beginning with Adam and Eve. And how, isn't it cool how the story has all of these different steps to build up to Christmas story, right? Christmas wasn't the beginning. It's definitely not the end. Okay, so we've got how it all began with Adam and Eve. God started over with Noah. God gave Abraham a promise. God saw Hagar in the desert when she was crying. God chose Jacob and Leah to be the ones to keep going, how God's going to bring the child into the world, how God gave Joseph dreams, and God used Joseph to save the world, and then God spoke to Moses, used Moses to save the world, and then how God told the Israelites to walk around the city of Jericho with Joshua, and then how God chose Saul to be the first king, but he didn't obey God, and so then God chose David to be the king, because he's the king after God's own heart, right? King after God's own heart. Well, and then yesterday we talked about God's temple and King Solomon, David's son, building God a special golden temple. Well, today we are going to talk about what happened next. So, after Solomon died, God's people had a lot of other kings. And some of them listened to God, and they led God's people to listen to God. But some of them didn't. When God's people were listening to God, God came back to them, didn't he? But most of the kings were bad. They were strong and tall and brave, but they didn't listen to God. So when God's people weren't listening to God, they didn't care if God was there or not. Could you imagine? I know. But that didn't stop God, though. God loved them the way that you love your best friend. No matter what, right? The way that I love you. No matter what. That kind of love. So God kept reaching out to his people. Reaching out to his people. Just like, no, come back to me. And so he sent them special messages with special messengers called prophets. Can you say prophets? Prophets. Right, not a tricky word. But their job, the prophet's job, was to remind God's people that the only way that they could be happy was if God was with them. Well, one of those special messengers or prophets was a man named Elijah. And God used Elijah to get everyone's attention. One day, Elijah asked the king, this was a king that was not following God, was not trusting God. In fact, he was leading God's people to worship other gods. But Elijah said to the king, he said, why aren't you listening to God anymore? Why are you listening to Baal, the fake god? Baal didn't rescue you from Egypt. Do you remember back over here when God talked to Moses and told Moses, hey, the rest of my people, do you remember when God led the people out of Egypt? Well, that's what he's talking about. Elijah said, King, Baal didn't rescue you out of Egypt. God did. Meet me on the top of Mount Carmel tomorrow, and I'll prove it. How's he going to prove it? Well, Elijah showed up to Mount Carmel, and the king came too, along with 450 prophets for Baal. Remember, Baal was the false god, the fake god, the statue that they wanted to worship instead of the real God. Well, all around the mountainside, God's people gathered to watch. They wanted to see who was stronger, God or Baal. So who do you think was stronger? God. Of course. Well, Elijah decided that they would have a contest. He would put a bull, like a big male cow, on one altar. And they would put a bull on another altar. So they had two altars, okay? And then they would ask each of their gods to do a miracle, to send down fire to burn up the bull, or the sacrifice, right? So, what do you think is going to happen? They have two altars, one for Baal and one for the real God. And they're like, okay, you're going to pray to your God, I'm going to pray to my God, and we're going to see which God can bring down fire. What do you think is going to happen? Well, let's see. So, Elijah said they were each going to ask their God to do a miracle, to send down fire to burn up the bull. Whoever sent fire was the real God. After all, that's how God led his people out of Egypt, remember? With a cloud, a pillar of cloud, and a pillar of fire. And that's how God showed up at Solomon's temple, too, remember? With the fire. So the prophets of Baal went first. All 450 of them. Well, they danced around, and they sang songs, and they jumped up and down, and they did everything that they could. But there wasn't any fire. Just a bunch of guys dancing and shouting and looking silly. Well, Elijah went next. He put water all over the altar. A lot of water. Buckets of water. Can you have a fire if there's a lot of water? No! What was he doing? Well, everybody thought there's no way that will burn. And then Elijah prayed. He said, God, you're the same God who was with Abraham. Remember? Abraham. And Isaac. And Jacob. And God, you are our God too. But no one's listening. So get everyone's attention. Would you send fire on this altar? And you know what? God did it. Like a thunderbolt. Yes, just like that from heaven. Fire came down and scorched the altar and the bull and all the water. And everyone who saw it said, only God is God. Only God is God, right? What a great day. But things weren't always easy for Elijah after that. The king did not like losing his contest on Mount Carmel, and Elijah had to run and hide in a cave. Elijah thought he was all alone in that cave. But hadn't God just shown up for him on the mountain? You think he was all alone in that cave? Nope. Elijah wasn't alone, even when Elijah was hiding, even when Elijah was in a dark cave, even when Elijah was the only one on Mount Carmel who thought God could win the contest. God was with him. God was very happy with Elijah. And many years later, God decided to come down and bring Elijah up to live with him in heaven forever. That was good news for Elijah. But it reminded the rest of God's people that God wasn't always there. You see, with Elijah gone, God seemed far away. So God's people began to hope and to pray, God, will you come back to stay? We're going to see what happens tomorrow. See you later, everybody.